Welcome back. If you were with me for part one, you'll remember I promised you a few things before we said goodbye. A habit that quietly ages the whole face without most of us ever suspecting it. One of my favorite ways to look more polished without adding a single extra step. And a secret near the very end that has less to do with makeup and more to do with something deeper. We're getting to all of it today. If you've just found me here and haven't watched part one yet, I gently suggest going back to it when you have a moment, because the first 13 secrets really do lay the groundwork for everything we're talking about now. I'll leave it linked for you. But don't worry, you won't be lost if you stay right here with me. Let's pick up exactly where we left off. Secret 14. The habit that quietly ages the whole face. Here it is. The one I mentioned at the very start of this series. It's squinting. Not the dramatic kind. The small, everyday kind most of us don't even notice we're doing. Squinting at our phones, squinting in bright sunlight without sunglasses, squinting at a menu in a dim restaurant because we're too vain or too rushed to put on our reading glasses. I did this for years, especially with sunglasses. I have a lovely pair I bought on a trip to Italy, and for the longest time, I'd leave them in my bag rather than my face, thinking I didn't want to look like an old woman hiding behind sunglasses. What I didn't understand is that repeated squinting, day after day, year after year, trains certain muscles around the eyes to hold a particular tension, and over time, that tension becomes part of the resting expression of the face, even when we're not actually squinting at anything. I noticed it clearly one afternoon looking at photographs from a trip. In every single outdoor photo where I wasn't wearing sunglasses, I looked faintly irritated, even though I remember feeling perfectly happy that day. It was simply the squint. Now I wear sunglasses generously, and I actually keep 2 pairs of reading glasses, one in my bag and one by my favorite chair, so I'm never tempted to strain my eyes trying to read something without them. It sounds almost too ordinary to matter, but protecting your eyes from unnecessary strain, consistently, over years, does something for your resting expression that no cream ever could. Secret 15. My favorite way to look polished without more makeup. This is the one I promised you, and it costs nothing at all. It's simply this. Trim your hairline and eyebrow area and clean up any stray hairs along your jaw or upper lip on a regular schedule, the same way you'd keep up with a haircut. I know this sounds almost too small to be a secret, but stay with me. As we get older, we sometimes develop a few finer hairs in places we didn't have them before, along the jaw, above the lip, and at the same time, our eyebrows can grow a little unruly in places while thinning in others. Left unattended, even for a few weeks, this creates a subtle sense of things looking slightly untended, even when our makeup is done beautifully. I keep a small pair of precision scissors and tweezers in my bathroom drawer, and every Sunday evening, while I'm doing absolutely nothing else, I spend about 5 minutes tidying my brows and checking my jawline in good light. It's become a small ritual rather than a chore. The effect of this one habit, done consistently, is that I look finished, even on days I'm wearing no makeup at all. People have told me I look put together running errands in a plain t-shirt, and I promise you, it isn't the t-shirt. It's this 5-minute Sunday habit that quietly does more work than they realize. Secret 16. The skincare order mistake. For years, I applied my skincare products in whatever order felt right at the moment, without giving it much thought. A friend who used to work at a cosmetics counter gently corrected me one day, and it made a genuine difference. The general idea is simple. Apply products from thinnest consistency to thickest, and give each layer a minute or two to actually settle before adding the next one. I was piling a heavy night cream on immediately after a thin serum, and the 2 products were essentially fighting each other rather than working together, with the heavier cream blocking the thinner serum from properly absorbing. Once I slowed down, applying my thinnest product first, waiting, then building up to heavier creams and oils last, I noticed my skin looked less congested the next morning and held moisture far better throughout the day. It isn't about buying more products. It's about respecting the order in which the ones you already own are meant to work. Secret 17. A lesson from a woman named Vivian. I want to tell you about another woman who taught me something important, because I think stories stay with us longer than instructions do. Vivian was a woman I met at a bridge club years ago, well into her 80s at the time, and she had this remarkable habit of never rushing anything about her appearance. She once told me, almost in passing, that she never left her house without checking herself from the side and from behind in a mirror, not just from the front. I laughed at first, but she was serious. She said most of us obsess over our front-facing reflection and completely forget that other people see us from every angle throughout the day, waiting in a checkout line, sitting across a room, walking away after a conversation. I started doing this myself, and it changed small things I'd never paid attention to. I realized my cardigan bunched oddly at the back when I sat down. I noticed the back of my hair sometimes went flat in a way I never saw from the front. Small things, but noticeable to everyone except me. Now, before I leave the house, I take 15 extra seconds and check myself from more than one angle. Vivian was right. It's a small habit, but it closes a blind spot most of us never think to look at. Secret 18. Clothing necklines matter more than we think. Here's something I wish I'd understood decades earlier. As the neck and décolletage change over time, certain necklines that once looked lovely can start to feel unflattering, not because anything is wrong with us, but because the shape of what we're framing has shifted. Very high, tight, close-fitting necklines, which I wore often in my 50s, started to feel like they were cutting my neck off from the rest of me, drawing attention to exactly the area I felt least confident about. On the other hand, a plunging, very low neckline sometimes felt like it was trying too hard, and not in a way that felt like me. What I discovered, almost by accident, was that a soft V-neck or a gently scooped neckline does something wonderful. It elongates the neck visually and draws the eye in a smooth, continuous line up toward the face, rather than creating a hard stopping point. It's flattering without being showy. I'd encourage you to try on a few different necklines you may not normally reach for, and really look at how each one affects the line from your collarbone up to your chin. You might be surprised, the way I was, at how much a simple shift in neckline shape can lift your whole appearance without changing anything about your body at all. Secret 19. The jewelry scale nobody mentions. As we get older, our features can soften slightly, and delicate, dainty jewelry that once looked charming on us can sometimes get visually lost against our face, rather than enhancing it the way it used to. I had a collection of very thin, delicate gold chains I adored for years, and I kept wearing them without noticing that they'd started to look almost invisible in photographs, disappearing rather than adding anything to my overall look. What I learned, mostly through experimenting, is that slightly bolder jewelry, not costume jewelry loud, but a touch more substantial than what I wore when I was younger, tends to hold its own beautifully against more mature skin and softer features. A slightly thicker chain, a statement earring instead of a tiny stud, a single meaningful ring instead of several delicate ones. It doesn't need to be expensive. It simply needs enough visual weight to complement rather than disappear. If you're still with me, be sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. I have so much more of this list to share with you, and I'd hate for you to miss any of it. Secret 20. Rethinking age appropriate entirely. I want to address something directly, because I think it's held so many of us back without our even realizing it. For most of my life, I unconsciously believed there were certain things a woman, my age, simply shouldn't wear or do. Bright colors were for younger women, certain hairstyles were for younger women, a bit of shimmer on the eyes was for younger women. I don't even know exactly where I absorbed these ideas, but I carried them for decades, quietly limiting myself, without ever questioning where the rule actually came from. It wasn't until I was well into my 60s that I started to genuinely question this. Who decided that a woman my age couldn't wear a beautiful emerald green blazer or a touch of soft shimmer on her eyelid for an evening out? Nobody, really. It was simply an old, unspoken rule I'd inherited and never examined. Once I let go of the idea that certain things were off limits simply because of a number, I started making choices based on what actually suited me, rather than what I imagined was appropriate for my age. And almost without exception, the things that suit us are far more individual than any general rule about age could ever account for. I'd invite you to think honestly about whether any of your own choices are being quietly limited by a rule you've never actually questioned. You might find, the way I did, that the rule was never really true to begin with. Secret 21, the skincare product. Most of us skip. I want to mention something practical here because it surprised me how much of a difference it made. For years, I skipped moisturizing my neck and the back of my hands with the same care I gave my face, treating those areas almost as an afterthought, even though they're just as exposed to the sun and just as visible to everyone we meet. Once I started extending my facial skincare routine down to my neck and onto the backs of my hands every single time, using whatever leftover product was on my fingertips rather than washing it off, I noticed a much more even, cohesive appearance across my whole upper body, rather than a face that looked cared for sitting above a neck, and hands that looked neglected by comparison. It costs nothing extra. It simply means extending the same 5 seconds of care you're already giving your face to two areas most of us completely forget about. Secret 22. A compliment I didn't expect. I want to share a small story here because I think it illustrates something important better than advice alone can. A couple of years ago, I decided, somewhat on a whim, to stop dyeing my hair and let it transition to its natural silver. I was nervous about it, if I'm honest. I worried it would age me, that people would suddenly see me differently. What actually happened surprised me. A young woman, maybe in her late 20s, stopped me in a grocery store to tell me how beautiful my hair color was and asked where I'd had it done. I remember laughing and telling her it was completely natural, and she looked genuinely astonished, telling me she wished her hair would gray so evenly and beautifully. I share this because I think so many of us carry fear about changes we haven't even made yet, based on assumptions about how the world will respond. Often, the thing we're most afraid will make us look older is the very thing someone else finds striking and beautiful. I'm not telling you to stop dyeing your hair if you love doing it. I'm simply telling you that our own fear is sometimes a far less accurate judge than we assume it is. Secret 23. Simplify rather than add. Here's a mindset shift that changed how I approach getting ready entirely. For years, whenever something about my appearance bothered me, my instinct was to add something to fix it. Another product, another step, more concealer, more coverage. What I've learned, slowly and sometimes reluctantly, is that after 60, the better instinct is often to simplify rather than to add. A heavy, multi-step makeup routine, applied with the best intentions, can sometimes end up emphasizing exactly the texture and changes we're trying to minimize, simply because more product means more opportunity for it to settle unevenly. Now, before reaching for another product, I ask myself honestly whether removing or lightening something might actually solve the issue better than adding to it. More often than I expected, the answer is yes. A lighter hand, fewer steps, better quality over quantity. This has become far more effective for me than any elaborate routine ever was. Secret 24. What I learned from an old photograph. I found a photograph recently from my 40th birthday, tucked into an old book I hadn't opened in years. I remember exactly how anxious I felt that day about turning 40, convinced I was somehow saying goodbye to something. Looking at that photograph now, from where I stand at 69, I don't see a woman who needed to worry the way she did. I see a woman with her whole life still ahead of her, who spent an enormous amount of energy being afraid of a number, energy she could have spent simply enjoying being exactly who she was at the time. I think about that photograph often now, especially on days when I catch myself feeling anxious about some new change I notice in the mirror. I try to ask myself whether, 20 years from now, I'll look back at photographs of myself today and wish I'd spent less time worrying and more time simply living in this face, this body, this particular chapter. I share this not as advice exactly, but as something I wish someone had told me decades ago. The years you spend afraid of aging are years you don't get back, and they're rarely as necessary as they feel in the moment. Secret 25. The face I actually want now. This brings me to the last secret, and I've saved it for the end because I believe it matters more than anything else on this entire list. For a long time, without fully admitting it to myself, some small part of me was still chasing the face I had at 39. Not obsessively, not desperately, but quietly, underneath everything else I was doing. Somewhere along the way, that changed. I no longer want the face I had 30 years ago. What I want now is for the face I actually have, today, at 69, to look cared for, alive, genuinely, unmistakably mine. That shift changed everything about how I approach beauty. Every choice I've shared with you across these 2 videos isn't really about disguising the years. It's about honoring the woman those years have made me into and giving her the same care and attention I once gave a much younger version of myself, simply because she deserves it too. I'd love to know, before we close today, what is one beauty rule you stopped following after 60? Something you were taught or simply absorbed somewhere along the way that you finally let go of? Tell me in the comments. I genuinely love learning what other women have discovered along their own path. If you've enjoyed spending this time with me, talking about beauty, style, confidence, and what it really means to age well, I'd love for you to subscribe so we can keep having these conversations. And if you know another woman who might appreciate this, a sister, a friend, someone at exactly the stage of life we've been talking about, I'd be so grateful if you shared this with her. And if you found your way to this video first, go back and watch part 1 when you get a chance. It really does complete the whole picture. Beauty after 60 was never really about erasing where we've been. It's about learning, finally, to look at ourselves the way the people who love us already do, with warmth, with respect, and with the simple, quiet understanding that we have never stopped being worth the effort. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. Have a blessed day.